In my years of living in this earth, observing people and their ways, I have come to realize something revolutionary. Intelligence isn't about knowledge alone, but how you think, act, and how well you learn from your mistakes. So, how do you recognize those who are blind to reason, resistant to growth, and trapped in their own ignorance? In this video, we'll break down 6 unmistakable signs of let's just say someone who lacks wisdom. Now, before we get into this list, let me tell you why it matters. Spotting these signs isn't about judging others, it's about reflection, growth, and yes, avoiding these mistakes in our own lives. It's also about helping those who might not even realize that they are trapped in their own cycle of foolishness. So, join me on this journey, because the path to wisdom always begins with awareness. 1. A closed mind. You know, I've met people who remind me of those old, gnarled trees that stand proud and stiff in the middle of a storm, unbending, unyielding, and in their refusal to sway, they snap. That's what a closed mind is like. It resists the wind of change, of reason, of possibility, and in the end, it breaks. There's a certain kind of stubbornness that masquerades as strength. People wear it like armor, pretending it protects them. But in truth, it cages them. I've watched good men, intelligent, capable men, cling to outdated beliefs, broken systems, and biased perspectives, simply because they couldn't stomach the idea of being wrong. They held on to their ideas like a drowning man clings to a rock, not realizing that rock is dragging them to the bottom. A wise man understands that he knows little, while a fool believes he knows all. That's not just a quote, it's a warning, a compass pointing toward growth. Epictetus said it more sharply. It is impossible for a man to learn that which he thinks he already knows, and yet, how many of us live as though we've got it all figured out? I remember an old craftsman I knew, gifted with his hands, no doubt about it. He made beautiful things, but he lived like the past was scripture. His father taught him a method, and that was law. New tools? He called them fads. Innovative materials? He scoffed. If it was good enough for my father, he'd say, it's good enough for me. And for a while, he got by. But the world around him evolved. Competitors learned new techniques, customers changed, and while others adapted, he stagnated. His work, once revered, became dated. Eventually, he was forgotten. That's the price of a closed mind. It keeps you stuck in a world that no longer exists. And the irony? The closed-minded man often prides himself on his principles, when in reality it's just fear in disguise. Fear of change, fear of being wrong, fear of growth. Once I was locked in a heated debate with a colleague over a major project. I had data, insights, experience. He had stubbornness. He wouldn't budge, and I grew tired. So I let him lead. And, predictably, it crashed and burned. But something remarkable happened. He came back to me, humbled, and asked for help. That was the moment he started to grow. Not because he succeeded, but because he failed. And let that failure teach him something. So don't be the man who's always certain, always right, always sure. Be the one willing to listen, to unlearn, to question. True strength doesn't come from having all the answers. It comes from having the courage to ask the hard questions. 2. The habit of blaming. Let me tell you something I've learned the hard way. Blaming others is one of the most seductive and destructive habits a man can fall into. It gives you a temporary sense of relief, like cooling your forehead with a wet cloth after being punched in the face. But it doesn't fix the problem, it just delays the healing. I knew a man named Alex, bright, full of potential, but imprisoned by blame. If something went wrong in his life, you could bet your last dollar he'd have a reason why it wasn't his fault. The economy, the government, his ex, his boss, Mercury in retrograde. It didn't matter what it was. He always played the victim. And you know what? It worked for a while. People sympathized. He told compelling stories. But over time, those stories became excuses, and those excuses became chains. He didn't grow. He didn't change. He didn't evolve. He just spiraled. Then came the day he lost his job. Downsizing, sure, but others rebounded. Alex didn't. He wallowed, he raged, he cursed the world, but he never once looked inward, never once asked, what could I have done differently? He thought the world owed him something, but the world owes none of us anything. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That quote, that's dynamite for the soul. It breaks the chains of blame and points us inward, toward responsibility. The truth is, the moment you start owning your life, every mistake, every misstep, every shortcoming, is the moment you begin to transform. Responsibility is not a burden, it's a weapon. It's how you carve meaning from chaos. So let others blame the stars, the system, the seasons. But you own your story, every chapter, even the messy ones, especially the messy ones. 3. Arrogance over humility. Pride is like salt in sweet tea. A little bit of confidence adds flavor, but too much, you ruin the whole thing. I've seen arrogance rot from the inside. It disguises itself as certainty, but it's built on a foundation of fear. Fear of appearing weak, of being wrong, of losing control. Robert was a man I once admired. Self-made, sharp, charismatic. He built a company with his bare hands. In the early days, he was all ears, asking questions, listening, learning. But success has a way of whispering lies. It told him he was invincible, that he knew best, that he no longer needed input. The higher he climbed, the more deaf he became. His team would warn him, try to redirect him, even beg him to reconsider decisions, but he brushed them off. "I've built this empire," he'd say. "I know what I'm doing." And then the market shifted, competitors innovated, customers adapted. But Robert, he stood still, basking in yesterday's success. His company crumbled beneath him. Seneca once wrote, "What man can you show me who values his own errors, who lays hands upon himself as a judge?" The answer is, very few. But those few, they're the ones who rise from the ashes. Humility isn't weakness, it's wisdom wearing armor. It's the strength to say, "I don't know." It's the courage to ask, "Can you teach me?" And it's the grace to admit, "I was wrong." If you want to grow, be willing to be wrong. Be willing to be corrected. That's how you go from good to great. 4th, lack of empathy. Let me tell you, the absence of empathy in a man is a terrifying thing. It's like a house with no windows, cold, isolated, void of warmth or light. I once went through a devastating loss, the kind that reshapes your soul. Grief had wrapped itself around my chest like a vice. During that time, a colleague named Carl treated me like a burden. He'd roll his eyes at my silence, joke about my bad vibes, and dismiss my pain with comments like, "Everyone has problems." Carl was the kind of man who thought emotions were liabilities. He measured strength by how little you cared, but he misunderstood everything. Real strength isn't about apathy. It's about compassion. It's about having the capacity to carry someone else's burden for a while, even if yours feels heavy too. Marcus Aurelius said, "What injures the hive injures the bee." We're all connected. To harm one is to harm the whole, and to ignore the suffering of another is to sever the thread that holds society and our souls together. Carl eventually faced his own storm, and no one stood with him. not because we were cruel, but because the bridges had long been burned. He'd made empathy a foreign language, and when he needed understanding, no one could speak it. If you want to live fully, you must learn to feel deeply. Empathy doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. And to be fully human, that's the strongest thing you can be. 5. Fear of change. Change. It terrifies people, and I get it. Change is uncomfortable. It shakes you, unmakes you, demands that you let go of what you know. But let me tell you something. Change is the forge where resilience is made. There was a little bookstore I loved, a haven of musty pages and quiet corners. The owner, Henry, was a gentle soul. He loved stories, loved people, but he refused to modernize. No website, no social media, no e-books. Books are meant to be touched, he'd say, and he wasn't wrong, but he wasn't right either. The world moved on, and he stayed rooted in nostalgia. Eventually, the foot traffic vanished, the lights dimmed, and the doors closed. Zeno taught that living according to nature means flowing with it, not fighting against it. Change isn't the enemy, it's the very essence of life. The seasons change, the tide changes, we change. To resist change is to deny your own becoming. It's to fight against the very force that shapes us. So lean into it, bend with the wind, learn, adapt. That's how you survive. That's how you thrive. 6. Talking more than listening. The talkers. The ones who fill silence like it's a void to be feared. Who mistake volume for value and noise for knowledge. I knew a manager once, let's call him Greg. Every meeting he'd hijack the room with his monologues. Vision, strategy. Let me tell you what I did at my last job. We all sat like statues, not because we agreed, but because we couldn't get a word in. Greg failed, not because he lacked intelligence, but because he lacked ears. He didn't hear the warnings, the insights, the gold hidden in quiet voices. He missed the forest for the sound of his own axe swinging. Socrates taught by questioning, by listening, by being still enough to hear not just what was said, but what was meant. That's wisdom. That's power. Talk less, listen more. The world opens up when you stop trying to dominate it and start trying to understand it. In the end, these stories, these flaws, are mirrors. They show us who we are and who we might become. The closed mind, the blame, the pride, the apathy, the fear, the noise. They're all masks worn by fear. But we can choose differently. Open your mind, own your life, stay humble, feel deeply, embrace change, listen fully. That's the path, that's the work, that's the way forward.